No one ever expected a wedding to end in blood. The guests were still smiling when 28-year-old bride Emily Watson hit the marble floor, hard. Her white dress spread around her like a broken promise, her face covered in blood, and standing over her was her groom. Michael Hayes, the man she was supposed to spend forever with, had just punched her in front of everyone. His fist was still raised when the screams started. Someone yelled to call the police. The priest froze. The best man tackled him to the ground. Cameras flashed. Cell phones recorded. And through the chaos, Michael kept sobbing the same words over and over. "I saved her. I had to save her. Please, you have to believe me. I saved her life." By nightfall, the video had gone viral. The internet called him a monster. His own mother disowned him, and his bride, his victim, was fighting for her life in the hospital. This was supposed to be the happiest day of their lives. Instead, it became the day the world decided that Michael Hayes was pure evil. But what if everyone was wrong? The world saw a groom who snapped, but there's another side no one ever told. A warning that came too late, and a choice no man should ever have to make. Michael's mugshot went viral across every platform. Emily woke up in the hospital whispering, "Where's Daniel? Where's Michael?" And inside that church, the camera captured something on the security footage, a faint shadow behind Emily that shouldn't have been there. Why did Michael hit Emily? What really happened inside that church before the cameras started rolling? Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. 6 months earlier, Michael Hayes met Emily Watson at a community fundraiser in their small Ohio town of Millbrook. Michael was a structural engineer, the kind of guy who double-checked everything, who planned his life in careful increments and never made rash decisions. Emily was a pediatric nurse at Millbrook General, known for staying late with scared kids and remembering every patient's name. Their first conversation lasted 4 hours. They talked about everything from childhood dreams to their shared fear of disappointing their parents. Michael told her about losing his father to cancer when he was 19. Emily told him about her younger brother, who died in a car accident when she was 16. They bonded over loss, over the weight of being the strong one in their families, over the exhaustion of always holding it together. By the end of that night, Michael knew something had shifted in his carefully planned life. Within 8 months, they were engaged. Michael proposed at Miller's Peak during a hike, and Emily said yes through happy tears. His best friend Jake Morrison, a practical high school history teacher, noticed how happy Michael had become. "For the first time in your life, you seem genuinely happy," Jake told him. The engagement should have been the happiest time of their lives. But 3 weeks before the wedding, something changed. He thought it was just wedding nerves. But sometimes what feels like anxiety is actually a warning we choose to ignore. Michael began having vivid nightmares 3 weeks before the wedding. In every dream, he stood at the altar watching Emily walk down the aisle. But something was terribly wrong. Her face would blur and shift. Her eyes would turn completely black. And when she opened her mouth to say her vows, thick black smoke would pour out, choking him until he couldn't breathe. He woke up screaming multiple times, trying to convince himself it was just wedding stress. But then one morning, he found 3 deep scratch marks on his chest that hadn't been there when he went to sleep. Fresh scratches, still slightly bleeding, arranged in parallel lines like something had dragged claws across his skin. He told his best friend Jake about the dreams during coffee. Jake told him it was just anxiety, that his brain was processing fear about commitment. Michael wanted to believe that. But the dreams kept getting worse, and Emily started acting strangely too. She'd forget entire conversations they'd had the day before. She'd zone out mid-sentence, staring at nothing with completely empty eyes. One evening at dinner, Emily stopped eating and stared at the wall behind Michael for 2 full minutes. When he touched her hand, she flinched violently and knocked over her water glass. She had no memory of spacing out. That night, Emily saw something that terrified her. While brushing her teeth, she noticed a dark handprint on her bathroom mirror, appearing from inside the glass itself. When she touched it, the glass was ice cold. The print faded and disappeared. For just a moment, her reflection didn't move when she did. It just stood there, watching her with an expression she didn't recognize on her own face. 2 weeks before the wedding, Emily's mother, Carol, found something horrifying. Emily's custom wedding veil, which had been locked in Carol's closet, was completely shredded. Long, ragged tears ran through the expensive lace, and dark stains that looked like dried blood were scattered across the white fabric. The door had still been locked. Nobody could have gotten in. Days before the wedding, Emily woke to find a single white rose on her nightstand. She assumed it was from Michael. He swore he didn't send it. And in that moment, both of them realized something was very, very wrong. They thought it was just bad luck. But sometimes, bad luck is the warning we choose to ignore. If this story has your heart racing, comment where you're watching from. I want to see who's brave enough to hear how this ends. When Carol called Michael over and showed him the ruined veil, he noticed it smelled faintly of rot. Carol broke down crying and admitted she'd been having nightmares too. Every night for a month, she'd dreamed of Emily in her wedding dress, crying blood, while a voice whispered that Emily belonged to the darkness now. Michael and Carol sat at her kitchen table for hours, two people trying to make sense of something that made no sense. Carol wanted to cancel the wedding. Michael was torn. Every rational part of his brain screamed that they should stop, but he couldn't imagine hurting Emily by calling off their wedding over nightmares and a destroyed veil. Emily called Michael at 2 a.m, 3 days before the wedding, sobbing hysterically. She'd woken up standing in her backyard in her nightgown, with no memory of going outside. Michael drove over and held her while she shook with fear, but he couldn't bring himself to tell her about everything else that had been happening. Jake confronted Michael the day before the wedding, telling him he needed to postpone, but Michael refused. He was exhausted, overwhelmed, and desperate to believe that love could overcome anything. Jake made him promise one thing: if something happens during the ceremony, anything that feels wrong, you'll act. You won't just stand there. Promise me. Michael promised. The world saw a villain. His best friend saw something that shouldn't exist. The night before the wedding, Michael and Emily talked on the phone for 3 hours about their future, about the life they'd build together. Neither of them mentioned the nightmares. Neither of them mentioned the fear. They just talked until the sun came up, and for those few hours, everything felt normal again. The wedding day arrived. Michael stood at the altar greeting guests, trying to project calm confidence despite the terror clawing at his chest. When Emily appeared at the back of the church, she looked beautiful, but as she walked down the aisle, the temperature in the church dropped suddenly. Michael could see his breath misting in the air. The lights flickered, and Emily's eyes behind her veil seemed unfocused and empty. When she reached the altar and lifted her veil, Michael saw something that stopped his heart. For just a fraction of a second, Emily's face flickered like a television losing signal. Her features were overlaid with something dark, something that grinned at him with too many teeth. Then it was gone. Just Emily again. Father Sullivan began the ceremony. Michael tried to focus, but something was screaming inside his head. Wrong. This is wrong. Then came the vows. Emily looked directly into Michael's eyes and began to speak. I, Emily, take you, Michael, to be my husband, to have and to hold from this day forward. Her voice sounded normal, but there was something underneath it. A second voice, deeper and colder, speaking the same words in unison with hers. The air grew even colder. People in the pews shifted uncomfortably. A baby started crying. As Emily continued her vows, Michael saw it clearly now, her face rippling like water, something dark moving behind her eyes. Her pupils dilated. Her smile widened too much. One of the altar candles went out, then reignited spontaneously. And in that moment, with absolute certainty, Michael understood. This wasn't just Emily anymore. Something else was there too, speaking through her. Something that was using these sacred vows to complete some kind of binding. Once Emily finished those vows, once she spoke that final promise, whatever was inside her would be permanent. She would be lost forever. He didn't strike his bride out of anger. He struck the thing that wanted her soul. Father Sullivan turned to Michael for his vows. Everyone was watching, 200 people waiting for him to speak. Emily looked at him expectantly. And beneath her expression, something else looked at him too. Something ancient and hungry and cruel. 8. Michael made a choice that would destroy his life. He pulled back his fist and punched Emily across the face as hard as he could. The crack echoed through the silent church. Blood sprayed from her nose. She collapsed to the marble floor, her white dress spreading around her, red blooming across the fabric. The church erupted in chaos. Jake tackled Michael to the ground. Carol ran to Emily. Someone yelled to call the police, and Michael, pinned to the floor, watched Emily's unconscious body and saw something no one else noticed. Black smoke, thin and wispy, rising from Emily's mouth, curling in the air, then dissipating like it had never been there. Michael started laughing through his tears. "I saved her," he kept saying. "I saved her." He punched her once to save her, and he was willing to give everything to set her free. The police arrived within minutes and arrested him. Sometimes love looks nothing like what we imagine. Sometimes it's the only thing standing between us and darkness. The video went viral. Michael's face was everywhere. He was called a monster, an abuser. The internet tore him apart. Strangers called for him to rot in prison. Emily woke up in the hospital with no memory of the ceremony. Everything between getting ready and waking up in the hospital was just gone. 3 weeks after the wedding, Emily asked to visit Michael in jail. When she walked into the visitation room, Michael could barely breathe. Her face was still bruised, her nose bandaged, but her eyes were clear in a way they hadn't been for months. "Why?" she asked. Michael told her everything, and he saw recognition in her eyes. "For weeks before the wedding, I felt like I was disappearing," Emily said, "like I was watching my life from far away. I was exhausted all the time. But after I woke up in the hospital, that feeling was gone. Something was very wrong, and now it's not. And that happened because of what you did." Emily reached across the table and took Michael's handcuffed hands in hers. "I forgive you," she said. After the visit, Emily started researching and found something chilling. Every few generations for the past 200 years, brides in their county had experienced strange deaths or disappearances around their wedding days. The pattern was undeniable. At Michael's sentencing hearing, Emily spoke on his behalf about the historical evidence, the security footage showing shadows that shouldn't exist, and how Michael had saved her from something neither of them fully understood. The judge sentenced him to probation and community service, but no jail time. They didn't get married again for 3 years. They spent that time in therapy, rebuilding trust, learning to heal. When they finally did marry in a small garden ceremony, Emily's voice was entirely her own. No shadows, no darkness. Just 2 people who'd survived the impossible. Would you forgive the person who hurt you if you knew they did it to save your soul? Or would you still walk away? 10 years later, they had a daughter named Hope, and Emily began helping other women who experienced similar symptoms before their weddings. "Maybe this is why it happened to us," Emily told Michael, "so we could help others." "Then it was worth it," Michael said, "all of it." Now the question is, what would you have done? If someone you loved was slipping away, would you trust your instincts even if it meant everyone would hate you? Would you be willing to destroy everything to save them? Think about it. Because sometimes the person who looks like the villain is actually the only hero in the story. Sometimes love looks like violence, like sacrifice, like choosing to be hated so that someone else can be saved. Let us know in the comments what you think. Subscribe for more stories that will make you question what love, fate, and destiny truly mean. And if you think this story was unbelievable, wait until you hear about the bride who spent $100,000 on her wedding but got divorced a few hours later.